So I know the internet can't take us all at once. So we're gonna let this thing go. And when I see people here, I'm gonna play the intro reel, and people are filing in. So we're gonna be talking about C-level people, fractional C-level people, and we're going to get started in just 1 minute. I'm David C. Barnett, and you're tuned in to Small Business and Deal Making, the podcast, YouTube channel, and blog where I talk about buying, selling, financing, and managing small and medium-sized businesses while controlling risk. So if you're looking to take control of your future through buying a business one day, or if you already own a business and you're looking to grow or exit, you've come to the right place. I talk about interesting things, I talk to interesting people, and I answer your questions every week right here. So be sure to hit like and be sure to hit subscribe, and let's get to it. Are you thinking of growing your business or beginning a journey into entrepreneurship? Take a shortcut to success by buying an existing and profitable business the right way. Visit businessbuyeradvantage.com and learn more about my online training, group coaching, and consulting services designed to help you win. Oh, we got our first comment already. Someone says we're fractionally on time. I know we're 20 seconds late. It's okay. We were having technical difficulties. Welcome, everyone, and big welcome to my guests. Thank you for joining me here today. I don't know about you, but I've seen more and more in my Twitter feed and on LinkedIn, different people talking about being fractional, this, that, and the other thing. And I've run into more and more people who've had these problems in their business. And I started to realize, hey, what this person needs is they need someone who is a specialist in this given domain. And so I thought, hey, let's do a show about this whole fractional C-level person sort of wave that seems to be taking over the small business world. And so I've invited 4 guests. I want to do a quick round introduction here. And what I'd like for each of you is just to introduce yourself, tell us what you do and for who, ideally, and maybe a little bit about what you did before you got into being a fractional role filler. So, Kevin, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, my name is Kevin Robinson. I'm the owner of Trajectory CFO, and we're fractional CFOs for businesses that are either in the stage of growth or planning their succession. I'm a CPA, and I've been always taking a bit of a CFO perspective in a lot of the roles that I've been in, also simultaneously being an entrepreneur. I guess what really sort of led me into this was I started to look at the opportunity of acquiring a business versus starting a business. And I spent more time educating business owners on their financials than doing deals. And I realized that this is a great opportunity to work with business owners to help them understand their financials, reach their financial goals, and help them stay accountable to what they want to achieve. So yeah, I'm glad to be here. And thanks, David.
So were some of those people who you approached about buying their business, did they end up becoming your first clients?
They did, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Jennifer, how about you?
Sure. So I provide fractional HR services, so human resources to small to mid-sized business, a lot in the professional service area. So other B2B service businesses tend to make up my clients, but I've had a wide variety of clients in various industries over the last few years. Before that, I, of course, had a corporate career in HR from some really small companies to one of the largest in Canada. And then somehow for a decade in there, I was also a shepherd and ran a yarn brand and yarn manufacturing company, which I think is the most important part because I was an actual entrepreneur in a very complex business that's pretty low profitability. I learned a lot about what my small and mid-sized business clients would be worried about in terms of ROI on the activities that we do. And so I think that's sort of what makes my practice a bit unique.
Okay. And when I think HR, I think recruiting and hiring people. Is that, do you do that, or is it other HR stuff? Maybe you can tell us what a common thing might be that you're doing with a client.
That's probably actually the least of it. So I do some hiring and recruiting, but it's more like the strategic programs. Like, okay, so once we hire them, how are we going to onboard them? What does the orientation look like? A lot of organizational development. So when you're scaling, how do we change these roles to grow with the company? How do we prepare people for what's going to be required of them as the company grows? Or do we need different people? Compensation is also compensation management, making sure you're not leaving money on the table and that everything's equitable. Those are probably the most common activities. And then a lot of policy and compliance. So most of my clients, I have clients in the US and Canada, but most of them are in the US, some in California. It's a very complex legislative landscape in California for small to mid-sized businesses trying to figure it out. I would be like, don't try this at home. It's very, very difficult and daunting. And so I get a lot of clients who are just like, please make sure I don't get arrested.
Devoreaux, how about you?
Wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me, David. Hello, everyone. Greetings. Good day. Happy Monday. Here we are at the beginning of a week. So I am Devoreaux Walton. I'm the founder and managing partner of Revelant, a management consulting firm offering marketing, branding, employer branding, and workplace culture consulting. So I fell into being a fractional CMO. I actually started doing consulting with small businesses and nonprofits back in 2015. My first client, I was primarily focused on social media, but what I've always loved, especially in my corporate career and working as a full-time marketer on the agency side, the corporate side, I've always loved strategy. What I found is that most organizations, nonprofits, small businesses, medium-sized businesses, they typically want to start promoting things. I've got this idea, I've got this offering, let's get it out there. They're so excited about it. But if we don't take a step back to make sure that we have a strategic approach, then a lot of the efforts are going to fall flat, which means we're wasting resources, time, money. We're spending our resources in different places where we don't really need to. So instead of wasting the money and just throwing it away, you can invest in the strategy. And that's really where I love to start with every client. We start with the strategy first. And then from a fractional CMO perspective, continuing that strategic oversight and really being able to manage that roadmap for long-term success.
It's interesting. In my own experience, of course, I had a career as a Yellow Page salesperson back in the late 90s into the early 2000s. I used to see this firsthand because a lot of small businesses would basically just, people would knock on their door and they would just buy advertising from, I guess, the people they liked or what have you. There really was no plan. I was often the one who would kind of help them create a plan, and they liked me, I guess, because I was the Yellow Page guy who told the florist to save some money to put radio ads out during Mother's Day and Valentine's Day, and they seemed to think that made sense. Mathew, the subscription attorney, why don't you give us a little insight into you and your background?
Yeah, well, David, thanks for having me here, and it's great to be amongst similarly minded folks in the fractional space. So I'm Mathew Kerbis. I'm the subscription attorney, and my clients subscribe for a reasonable monthly price for legal advice and services. I haven't come up with a rhyme for that part of it yet, but if you think about what a general counsel attorney does or an in-house attorney, they are generalists, and they try to help keep companies that are their one client out of legal trouble. And when they need to, they will hire specialized outside counsel for particular things like litigation or getting a patent, things like that, right? Well, What I decided I was going to do, because frankly, a lot of business owners will still hire outside counsel. It's just on the expensive billable hour. It's unknown. So they don't contact their attorney until they're already in a deep pile of you-know-what. And so I decided I was going to leverage the subscription model and really be even more like a fractional team member to these business owners and allow them to stay out of legal troubles, to stop even thinking about legal things at all so they can get back to what makes them money in their business or happy in their life if that's how they want to spend the saved time. Well, I serve not just small business owners, which I define a small business as any business that's not large enough to have a full-time in-house attorney. I also serve solopreneurs, so even some other fractional folks like me. I'm only licensed in Illinois, so I have a major disadvantage to the others on the call today because I could only help clients in Illinois. But then I'm also like a fractional GC, if you will, to everyday people. So imagine if you had a consigliere that you could just contact about legal stuff in your life. So I actually leverage it at all three of those levels at all different price points accordingly based on their level of needs.
Well, you raise a really interesting point because you talk about, if you have a particular need for some specialized legal advice, I would imagine that you are much better able to identify and sniff out the right provider of a certain specific legal skill than a general business owner would be, right? And I'm sure that everyone can probably think of an example where you ran into someone who bought something or hired someone, and you're like, hey, I don't really know if this person hired the right party to help them with this, but they didn't have the skills to know whether or not they were engaging the right party. And so you obviously know when another legal professional is making sense or not with whatever it is they're talking about.
Right. Look, I'm in the problem avoidance business more so than the legal problem solving business like every other lawyer. But I can still identify those problems. So one of the things you spend $150K or more on in law school is learning how to issue spot. Well, now for a fraction of that cost over many years, my clients get access to me issue spotting for them. And then, yes, one of my services in a way, though I don't market it like this, though, David, thanks for having me on, maybe I should, is like a concierge service in a way, right? So I could find whether it's an attorney I met through my podcast, Law Subscribed, or interview other lawyers who are some version of fractional or subscription attorneys, then I could refer it to them, or just based on my large network of lawyers I know throughout the U.S., I may be able to find an attorney for them in those situations. And look, not every situation, not every legal problem can be avoided. So ultimately, some of my best partners are other lawyers who just are more specialized at maybe a thing that I can still help a client with, just not all the way based on the circumstances.
We've got a bunch of people who are streaming in here to watch. Victor over in the UK says he's just given the program a like, and please, if you're out there watching right now, give it a like or a share or even leave a comment. It helps with the algorithms and helps with engagement and letting people know that it's a great show. So I want to know, Mathew, you said that you work by subscription, and so I'd like to go around again and just find out what sort of basis or terms are the rest of you working on? Are people paying you like a monthly fee, or is it by project? How do you work? Let's kick this off with Devoreaux. We want to start here?
Absolutely. So as a fractional CMO, it is a monthly retainer. And typically for the engagement, we will decide upfront how long the duration of the contract will be. For some clients, it's ongoing. So it's just that retainer on an ongoing basis. So it's really dependent upon the client. In the nonprofit space, what's interesting is with certain grants, the funding has to be allocated in a certain way. So I really just work with every client individually on whatever contract terms will be best for them.
To fit within the funding they have access to and stuff like that. Okay. Jennifer.
Same. So monthly retainer typically usually starts at least 90 days, and then we see where we're at after that in terms of renewal terms. I also like to make sure everybody has a little bit of a probationary period to make sure that we like working together and it's a good fit. So I specifically keep the initial contract to 90 days just so that we can feel each other out. And I do project-based work as well, though. So sometimes I'll have either former clients who have graduated off the retainer who want a very specific thing done, or I might be mentoring an existing HR team in a certain area of expertise to help them to roll something out that they're not that familiar with. So those types of things would be done on a project basis, which I always quote up front, and then just work with the
So with respect to your monthly retainer clients, what are you offering them? Is it a certain series of things that are going to get done over a period of time, or it is? Okay. So it's almost like this long project that you let people pay monthly for.
Pretty much, yeah. And I always start all of my engagements with a really thorough examination of what they have and where they need to get to. So technically it's an audit. Some people really don't like that word, but it's an audit so that we can properly plan their priorities and get them to where they think they need to be. If I don't know what's going on at all and I just kind of dive in there, I don't ask any questions or do any digging, it's really hard to be effective right out of the gate. So I always start the 90-day engagement with the audit. And then at the end, if we decide not to continue to work together, they have something really valuable in their hands. That's like a concrete deliverable or a project, if you will, that they can take with them, give to another HR consultant, to an HR team they intend to hire or whatever. But I like that because they leave with something, even if they decide on an ongoing basis, it's not going to be for them.
Okay. Kevin, how about you?
Yeah, so ours is slightly different. So we charge on an hourly basis, but there's sort of a fixed expectation for the amount of hours each month. So with our clients, we start with an onboarding phase that makes sure that in the accounting and finance world that their departments and their data is correct and there's no errors. Sorry. So I have a controller on my team that does the cleanups before we really get into the CFO cadence. But once we've sort of understood that the data we have is correct, we make a 36-month plan. We call it a 36-month projection. And every month we're reviewing those results to compare actuals versus what we projected. So we automatically set up, these touch points every month to put ourselves on a cadence to review the numbers and really use that time to identify where we're not in line and where we need to spend our time and where we need to focus. We also, with all of our clients too, we do have a weekly meeting. So there's 4 touch points a month. And those 3 other meetings, if we're not reviewing the financials, are to work on those problems, whether it's, what we can do to evaluate sales, ways that we can maybe spend marketing dollars, get some return, opportunities to lower gross profit margin, or improve it, or cut waste or cut expenses. So that's the cadence that we're on. So it would be a part-time basis. And I mean, we set up these 36-month windows because I feel like that's the time frame that, after that, your assumptions are you're wildly guessing. So it's, once we get started, it definitely isn't project-based because we sort of become part of the team. And we're working with these business owners to keep track of the results and keep them accountable to, paying attention to this and giving them areas where they can spend their times and focus. So, kind of like what Mathew mentioned, we want our business owners to be spending time on their business, doing what they do best. So we sort of cut through all the noise and all the clutter and all the data, and you give them the areas where they need to spend their time and attention on. So yeah, that's how we partner with them.
Well, one of the questions that I had for all of you was just about managing, like a lot of people who think about selling any kind of subscription service, one of the fears is about scope creep, that you will lock yourself into some fee with the client and then they'll keep asking you to do more, to do more. Kevin, it sounds like under your arrangement, if there is more work, then you just end up billing more because you're defaulting to that hourly bill sort of mechanism.
Yeah, precisely. And there's sort of 2 parts for it. Like, as I mentioned, I recently brought on a controller. We also have a junior accountant. So I can offer them services that are like maybe lower technicality at a better, more economical rate. But sometimes it drives a great conversation for us because if they're asking us to do something, it's like, well, is this a one-off or is this going to have to be done on repeat? And if it has to be done on repeat, maybe you need to build, more internal capacity to build into a role and responsibility of someone on your team, or maybe there's a new hire where this can be part of and be a better fit, where you're paying a better rate for getting some of this stuff performed. But it's definitely a challenge. It's hard to draw a line in the sand, and I'm sure, like everybody else in this call, we care deeply about our clients. So sometimes we have to kind of draw the line in the sand and tell ourselves when to stop and when to set them free to work on their problems. But it's something definitely to be mindful of. And I really do like the monthly retainer model, but the hourly sort of protects us there. And it allows us to keep doing more for the clients if that's what they require. And we think it's their best interest.
Well, David, I'll tell you, I've completely solved the scoping problems, and I've gone in depth on it on Jonathan Stark's Ditching Hourly podcast.
Well, there's a question here, and I was going to bring this up, Mathew, for you, because it sounds like you have answered this Mark's question here, asking if there's different tiers or buckets. It sounds like you have this kind of organized for your legal services.
Right. So, I mean, you have to put yourself in the shoes of your client, customer, patient, whatever fractional service you offer for any business, and think like, what would you want as a consumer of that product, service, et cetera? I don't like being locked into long-term subscriptions, so I'm not going to lock my clients into anything longer than month-to-month subscription. If I want out, they want out. And you know what? When you give your client the freedom to just get out, they like to stay. And frankly, like, I mean, it's hard. Not every business, and frankly, not every practice area in law is going to be the same way. Like, in particular, litigation, you can't just let them unsubscribe. Like, you're locked in unless the court lets you out, right? But in a lot of circumstances, I just let my clients unsubscribe and resubscribe whenever they want. I call them boomerang clients, right? And I give them that freedom. And what I found is even when they're unsubscribed, they still think of me as their lawyer, because whenever they need a legal thing, I make it all self-serve. They come back, they resubscribe. I see they've resubscribed. They reach out, or I reach out to them. Hey, you resubscribed. What can I help you with? And then I just have multiple different tiers. I mean, I have 3 lanes that a client goes in, right? The individuals, the freelancers, and the businesses. And within each of those buckets, if you will, there's 2 lanes that they could go down. And what I've done, and maybe this is unique to legal, but I have to imagine any industry could do it, I've unbundled all of my services. Lawyers didn't used to be able to do that.
Sounds like a low-cost airline.
Yeah, I've unbundled it all. And then like Costco, first you must subscribe, then you get access to independent a la carte, all the unbundled services. But if you want the better deal, you subscribe at a higher level subscription based on the tier appropriate for your needs. And then, of course, since I'm a solo independent, I will do custom pricing in between the tiers listed on my website. But all my pricing is listed on my website, and that is largely as a reaction to the legal industry being completely opaque with its pricing.
And so this sounds like another way of managing that scope creep, because people are paying the monthly retainer to be sort of in the group that you serve.
Right.
And then they're still kind of choosing a la carte for projects and things that they might do with you.
Something goes outside of the amount of projects per month that they get based on their subscription level, then it goes back to the a la carte pricing of $50 per page. But realistically, if they're high enough of a level, I could be magnanimous and say, we're just going to let that other extra project go because I want them to stay subscribed and be happy, right? And so it becomes an easy giveaway to keep the client subscribed at that higher level. But if it continues to happen, instead of charging them that a la carte fee, I would almost rather just get them up to a higher monthly subscription rate if it happens one or two times too many. And then that's higher recurring revenue for me, and they know they can continue to get this the additional services that they've been needing.
Have you bumped into capacity issues yet?
So I've been doing this for almost 3 years, and I've not bumped into capacity yet, but I am in the process of trying to bring on some law students, some legal externs. And so I'm like starting to break into outsourcing a little bit like internally, but also with the realization that I don't actually want to hire anybody full time. And what's great about having an extern or two is you'll get a new one or two every semester. And so that's sort of the idea that I'm going to have with that. But eventually we do have things called per diem lawyers or freelance lawyers. I may end up outsourcing some things here or there as the years go on, as the more and more clients sign up.
Okay. Can you share with us any of the particular fears that you may have heard or have been expressed to you by clients about the idea of these types of engagements? Kevin, has anyone ever, what are the common objections maybe that people might have before they want to engage with you?
Well, I honestly struggle with this one a little bit. I don't really have too many from the objection side. I think the fear that I hear most often, though, is that, these companies and the ones that I deal with are at a stage, right? We're either, opace their previous systems and processes, and they're growing at a great clip and they're trying to get to the next level, or they're a business owner or a team that wants to set up succession plan for the next 3 to 5 years. And they just don't have the $100,000 to $200,000, the 6-figure salary room to bring on a full-time CFO to help them through that sort of phase, right? And that goes for all the professionals I'm talking, like everybody else on this stream as well. So I think that the fear is a fear of being sort of bound and stuck. Whereas, that's where I think the fractional is a great opportunity, because we give accessibility to these companies that really can't make that leap because there's a bit of a barrier. But we give access to those professional resources on a flexible basis, lower cost as you need it. And like, what Matt mentioned as well, like we also become a bit of a liaison too. So if there's more professionals that are required, in my field, it's a lot of times, it might be a lawyer, it might be an accountant with a tax specialty. Well, I have great relationships that I'm happy to pass on to my clients to say, hey, I'm not the person to help you with this, but I know how to find the right person. Or, if they've got other professionals that are tax time, for example, sometimes they just don't want to be dealing with those, understanding why we made certain adjustments or why we did what we, but I'm kind of a filter for them to help them understand some of those pieces. So, I'm getting away from your question because I don't really see a lot in the fears, but I think that we're solving a problem to a common fear, which is how do I make that next step without, hiring a high level person to join their team, which they may or may not be able to afford or feel comfortable with.
Should people think about this like finding that right person, but just hiring them part-time? Is it analogous to that?
I think so. I definitely. And as long as they're comfortable with that, sort of sharing that person, having limited access to them, and also knowing that there is a bit of a line in the sand in terms of scope. I think when you talk about scope creep, that's one of the most important pieces, because that's the difference between a fractional and a full-time person, because a full-time person can do whatever, that team needs or requires of them in terms of their area of expertise. Whereas when you come to a fractional person, there is a bit of a, there is a bit of a barrier there where it says, okay, this is where I sort of stop and you need to pick up the ball. But I can be here to advise you and guide you.
This is great. Thank you. When I think about probably the first time I ran into people that I can remember on a regular basis doing these types of things in a fractional capacity, it was probably back in my Yellow Pages days when I had a couple of HR consultants that were doing this kind of work. This was 25 years ago. So Jennifer, would you say that there were a lot of examples of other people who kind of blazed the trail in the HR domain in this kind of work under these kind of work conditions?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really funny that you asked me that, because my very first job in HR was actually as a fractional consultant inside law firms in Calgary. So the guy that I worked for was way ahead of his time by most people's estimation. And there are people around in the last few years who think fractional is new. But I'll give him the credit for coming up with it first. And I've modeled my business based on his business, which I worked in. Now, of course, anytime you're a consultant, you're prone to being snagged up by the client. And that's what happened to me. So I went to go work full time in one of his clients. But yeah, I also want to say something about the fears. I don't encounter a lot of fears either, but I do encounter a lot of people who think that they can get the same thing from an HR help desk, which might be like $5 a head or something like that. And the truth is that I usually tend to get my clients after they've already tried that. Because you've got call center people who are reading off of scripts and have very, very finite authority to actually do anything within your organization. So right. I think HR continues to have difficulty getting people to understand the ROI of investing in strategic level HR. And until they've really, really felt the pain of kind of calling with a complex problem and getting a really simple, inappropriate answer, they don't really see the value in it. So I think that's probably the main objection that I run into is, well, but we've got this service over here that's like $5 a head. Why would I pay you that much? So until they kind of get into trouble a little bit, they're thinking that they can do it cheaper.
Yeah, I'll tell you, one of the biggest crises I think I ever had a client deal with that had to do with HR, and they called me, and they literally called me because they didn't know who to call. Mm-hmm. And someone had shown up in their office who had been drinking and picked a fight with another employee. Sure. And I was like, I know exactly how to fix this problem. I said, you need an HR consultant. And I have no idea. I like, or call you a lawyer. Like, I don't know what, like, some of the stuff that can happen is just crazy. It's best to have these relationships, obviously, before. Devoreaux, how about you? What sort of fears or concerns do some of your clients have before they are engaging with?
Yeah. So, within the world of 2024 with AI, we're in a very interesting space. So from a marketing perspective, when most firms are looking for marketing support, they're thinking, let me go find an agency. And agencies typically are going to focus on advertising or a very specific project basis. So if it's just one project to be solved for, but 9 times out of 10, most firms need more than just one project solved for. And so from that fractional CMO perspective, it's really that high level strategic direction and guidance, which you would get in someone, in-house as maybe a director or VP level. But if they don't have the money to afford for that, they're trying to piecemeal together. Well, let me find someone on Fiverr. Hey, let me do this AI thing where I can just create content. People can tell and even non-marketers can read a piece of content built by AI and say, something about this just isn't right. It's not going to be authentic. It's not going to be relevant. It's not going to fully resonate. Now, in 5 years, I think AI is going to be a much better contender in the marketing space with a lot of these platforms. But right now, We're still in earlier stages where the quality of it is so low. And if you really care about your brand and that brand experience with your end user, you certainly do want to make that investment to make sure that you're having that consistent, high quality experience, right? So typically, it's really just this lack of knowledge, not really understanding what a fractional CMO can do compared to Fiverr, compared to just finding someone in the Philippines off LinkedIn, or really looking for an AI platform. So the quality of what you get is really going to be worth the investment, depending upon your long-term goals for revenue and brand growth.
So you mentioned working a lot with not-for-profit. So I can just imagine, someone with a limited budget, they might be trying to spend as much of that money as they can on the, say, cost of the advertising, let's say. And so what sort of key things do you demonstrate to them in your conversation about why it makes sense to take part of that money for the planning and strategy?
Absolutely. So effective marketing strategies should always be connected to the overall business strategy. So where does the organization want to be in 2 years and 3 years and 5 years, and really being able to make decisions now to support that long-term or short-term plan. So not every nonprofit is necessarily ready or willing or able financially to make the investment in a fractional CMO. But if they've got enough money coming in, enough revenue, and the long-term goal is to really grow outside of just, those one-time donations from really large, generous donors, fundraising and really making that investment in a fractional CMO can go hand in hand. But it really depends on the strategy. Some nonprofits, they are small. They want to stay small. They want to have a working board. And so I've had a lot of conversations with nonprofit EDs who really are excited about having a working board to fulfill some of the needs to support the organization, which is a very different strategy and business strategy for the organization 5 years out. So it really goes back to, what the strategic plan is for the organization and how marketing can really fit in to help propel and accelerate that forward.
Awesome. Okay. Mathew, most small business people, if you ask them, do you have a lawyer? They're going to say yes, and they're going to point towards whoever they got to do something for them at some point in the past, right? And so what have you found? Have you gotten in speaking with prospective members to your program, have you gotten any kind of objections or pushback to the idea of paying for a subscription, or what might those have been?
I mean, the biggest pushbacks are things I've solved for, because I discovered it right away. And that is, am I locked into a long-term contract? And the answer is no. Right? And how much is it going to cost? And all my prices are on my website. Now, what I do find is one of the biggest holdups, if not a fear, is, I hired a lawyer maybe when I started a business, or maybe when I got in trouble just to do some paperwork. But I don't use a lawyer every day. I've gotten along fine with that one. Why do I need one now? So it's more of there's an education gap for me to fill, such as explaining how law is the operating system of society. And we do a really bad job, at least in the U.S. society, of teaching civics and teaching law, right? That's the impetus behind my Law for Kids podcast. And so what I'm there for is I'm there so that you don't have to have any more unknowns. And one of the other ways I help assuage these fears is I have a really low entry point just to get started at $20 a month, right? So you're paying more for subscription software to operate your business than you're paying for that. And the subscriber benefits are more limited there, and you're paying a la carte for everything on top of it. But then you could start to see the value and benefit at a really reasonable price of, it is good to talk to a lawyer and to work through some legal things, because now I could attack this next strategy, and feel better about it, right? Whatever it may be. And because I work with a lot of entrepreneurs around there, I'm also able to share non-legal specific knowledge with all of my clients. And so they get so much more added value, even just starting at that level, that they then feel more comfortable of subscribing at a higher level. So having that low entry point, easy to pay, easy to test out, that, I found that to be super important in helping get over those fears.
So I would imagine a lot of people who are your subscribers, it's just this occasional question pops up that has something to do with the law, and then they're like, "Oh, well, I can just reach out to Mathew and ask." Like what kind of volume of those sort of one-off inquiries are you handling amongst your subscriber load?
Yeah, so and Devoreaux may be able to appreciate this, especially in light of what she does. But like, people don't really buy problem avoidance; they buy problem solving, right? Like, they need intention, right? It's easier to sell Band-Aids than it is to sell vitamins, right? So like, I do get a lot of clients for the first time when I'm like maybe helping them get out of a problem that they're already in, and during that process, or like something that's very obviously legal, like signing a commercial lease, right? And so during the process of helping them do that transaction or settle that dispute without having to go to court, because like we said before we were live, I actually don't do anything litigation related, though I have 8 years of litigation experience. I will be issue spotting for them along the way. Hey, if this ever happens, this is the kind of thing you need to reach out to me and talk about. Hey, and just so you know, if this thing ever happens as a result of this or that, let me know. If there's a question, or if some future client of yours questions this clause in this agreement, reach out to me and let's talk about it, right? So like, it's just a matter of letting them know they're not going to be charged extra for whatever questions they have, because that's part of their monthly subscription. And then they do reach out. And it also behooves us to set up automations for outreach for at least once a month, checking in. Hey, just so you know, let's maximize your subscriber benefits. I don't quite say it like that. And let's see if there's anything I could help you with. So also encouraging that they reach out to ask the questions, because at least with the subscription model, you want them to stay subscribed and you want them to feel like they're getting value and to actually get value.
Well, how does it make you feel if you know you have a subscriber you haven't spoken to in a few months? Like, do you feel like, ooh, I might lose this person? They don't seem to be taking advantage of it.
There's a great example of how Netflix canceled a bunch of people's subscriptions when they weren't using it for like a year or two or something like that. And the reason they did that is to preserve the brand, right? And they reached out multiple times. You haven't watched anything in 2 years. So I do have a similar process where I will reach out multiple times. And if they don't respond, I let them know, hey, since I haven't heard from you, I do think they're getting their benefits, right? Even if they're just subscribed at $20 a month and I haven't heard from them, the benefit of that is they have access to schedule these calls with me. They have access to below market flat fee pricing and a la carte $50 per page pricing, right? So they're getting the value every month for the $20 a month. But if they're not using it, I don't feel comfortable with them staying clients. So I give them, and I haven't had to do this yet, because eventually they'll say, oh, yeah. I just like having you available if I need you. So I haven't actually had to cancel anybody's, but just like with the Netflix example, I gladly will if months go by and I reach out and they don't hear back. But when I've had to once say, hey, if I don't hear from you, I don't want you to feel like I'm just collecting your money without being available to you. So I will unsubscribe before the next payment period comes through. And that's when they said, no, it's fine. I just like having you available if I need you.
Awesome. So, watching today's conversation, there are likely some people that are experts, professionals, maybe in big companies, and they watch my channel because maybe they're thinking about, entrepreneurship or getting into business in some way. Let's start winding this up with some advice that you might give to somebody who is in that full-time role, and they're thinking that doing their trade or profession as a fractional person might be in the cards for them. What sort of things do you think they should be thinking about when they explore this? Kevin, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think the biggest thing is just the shift to being an entrepreneur and being a business owner. Getting away from being paid every 2 weeks to sometimes not getting paid 45 days, 60 days from when you perform the work, for example. And just juggling, various workloads and various situations is you need to be highly organized, and you need to be very, just sort of realistic about your calendar. And trying to be there for your clients, because we shift. I do, and I'm sure some of the others on the call here too, shifting from client to client to client throughout different times of the day. You're kind of sort of getting yourself up to speed all the time with that client, and also just really thinking about maybe what your niche or what your expertise is. As I mentioned when I introduced myself, I have a background of being an operator. I was a general manager of a manufacturing facility for 4 years as well. So all the advice that we give our clients about things that impact their people or changes in their processes. Like we understand what that means. We're not just using the numbers blindly to say, go do this and go do that. So I would sort of try to find a way to tie in maybe your expertise with an industry specific piece. So you can offer more dialogue there. So aside from
that would certainly make it easier to get customers, right? If you could speak
absolutely
to the particular needs of a certain industry.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Jennifer, how about you? Advice for someone thinking about going down this path?
Yeah, I think if you're on top of what Kevin already shared, I think if you're planning on staying as a solopreneur and you just want to fill your calendar, you could probably do that quite easily. There's lots of people looking for help out there. But it is pretty challenging to standardize and scale. I don't know if everyone else feels the same, but in HR, everything's different. Every company is different. Every situation is different. So I think you have to be prepared that if you want to get beyond just yourself and being, filling your calendar, which again is pretty easy to do if you're looking to just eject out of the corporate structure and work for yourself because you want to be an entrepreneur. But I think taking it to the next level really requires a lot of research preparation. And unfortunately, I think learning things the hard way. So, I started out hourly like Kevin. And then I moved to like a fixed retainer, and it's like, yeah, you have to learn about the scope creep the hard way. And the next time you do it, you'll do it slightly better. I wouldn't expect to come into it and just have it be smooth sailing, but it is very rewarding if you're a person who likes a lot of variety, likes learning about different types of businesses, which is the part that I absolutely love. So I love that any client I bring on is going to teach me about an industry that maybe I'm not as familiar with, or give me some new challenges. So if you're kind of like that type A person who likes a lot of variety, loves people, works well with all different personality types, I think it's a pretty relatively easy transition, I found, but that's just my own experience, of course.
Awesome. Devoreaux.
Absolutely. So if you're thinking about taking and embarking on the journey of being a fractional service provider, my best advice is to just try it. You won't know if you like it or hate it until you try it. So as a corporate employee, really being much more of an order taker, you've got the camaraderie of a team, you can delegate. It's very different when you are either a solopreneur or operating with a smaller scale team and having to manage everything, not only the client delivery, but also running the business. And so I think it's really helpful to have that experience and that exposure to trying it out, kind of like a test drive for a car. How would you know if you really like the way it rides if you don't sit behind the wheel? So do a test drive, see, if you like it, and see if there's, a level of interest and a level of resilience for all of the running the business aspects that you will have to do. In addition to the super fun client delivery part, you will have to run your own business, and maybe you hire other fractional providers for some of the aspects, but you certainly will be the one person accountable for your firm. So really giving it a go to test drive and see if you like the role as a fractional service provider will give you a lot of insight before you make the leap into full time as a fractional provider.
Thank you very much. Mathew, most lawyers are kind of fractional, right? Because they serve a whole plethora of clients. I guess what makes your situation very different is you just went to a completely, different kind of pricing and sales model. And so I'm curious about what you may have heard through your grapevines about what the other attorneys were thinking about what your offering was.
Yeah, so I'm about to cross episode 100 on my podcast, Law Subscribed, which is a podcast for lawyers who are interested in doing what I do, but I highlight the work of other lawyers on that podcast, so there's great interest. I was just at a conference speaking on this topic just a few days ago, and I also work with a lot of solopreneurs who are becoming independent consultants who want to do this. So I actually talk about this a lot, and so here it is. It's quick, though, because I say this a lot, so I know. Get paid up front. Right? Subscriptions help with that. That's the best business model. And if you're not using it, you should use it. Use tech to automate, going to Jennifer's point, right? My tech stack is 43 tools, but they don't all have to be expensive. But you could automate pretty much everything these days. It doesn't have to be expensive. If you're a virtual operation, like I'm limited to my Illinois license, but if it's a virtual operation, you don't actually meet anybody in person. Like my first year of operating expenses were $5,000 for operating expenses. And when I wrap up my year 3, it will be just under $10,000. So it hasn't even gone up that much. and I'm using better tools. That's why I'm subscribed to better and more powerful tools, right? Get business insurance, get E&O insurance, talk to an insurance broker and get the right policies for you. Join the Freelancers Union. It's free. You can get personal insurance products through there and other benefits too. But it's a nonprofit. It's called a union. It's a nonprofit. Check it out. Find out your ideal clients. Don't just say everyone's a client. Find out your ideal client and market to them. I mean, and hire Devoreaux to help you do that. Get involved with your local chamber of commerce, because if your ideal client is in your local chamber of commerce, people hire you because they know, like, and trust you. They will get to know, like, and trust you if you meet with them in person. Virtual is great. I love virtual, but definitely get together with people in person. Have a niche and use a trade name. Don't name the business after yourself, and that could become a saleable asset in the future.
So let me ask all of you this, and maybe someone can raise their hand if they want to answer this. Is this trend towards a growing number of people being fractional, dash whatever the profession is this merely an extension of the gig economy into more professional types of skilled work? I see a lot of nodding heads.
Yeah, sure. I mean, even if you're an Uber driver, you should still incorporate, right? Like, have them contract with your business, your single member LLC, not with you, the person, and then hire Kevin when you're ready to switch from, pass through taxation to S Corp, right? Like, that's I absolutely think so. Yes.
Okay. Awesome. So we got a couple of questions in here. There's a question here from Concise Advice says, have you ever heard of a fractional C-suite group where there would be a CFO, a CMO, a CCO, et cetera? Any of you seen that yet? Or maybe this is a trend on the horizon.
So I haven't seen it, but what I will say is my best referral partners, like at networking groups, are other fractional folks, because our existing clients are already in the mindset of, I want to outsource what I'm not skilled at or need a full-time person for. And so that education gap has already been crossed. So to the extent there is something like a C-suite group, I say, sign me up. I'm interested.
Awesome.
Sorry. The first fractional opportunity I mentioned when I first graduated school, I worked for someone else doing it, and he did have not that exact lineup, but he also had fractional accounting professionals, fractional strategic professionals, and payroll and stuff. So he was doing some bundling there, and you could basically get it all in one place. His niche was law firms. He was very, very, very focused on that in one particular market. And he did very well with it because he was like a stop shop kind of thing.
I have seen examples of it, to the viewer's question, where different sort of specialists have been in the same sort of consulting shop, almost like a real estate model where each of them had their own business, but they were using the same brand to kind of give the impression of being part of this bigger company, and referring business to each other, and each of them sort of sharing in the billables according to the work that they had done. So that's why I use the sort of like a real estate office model where everyone's kind of independent, but they have that same big banner above them. Anita, who's watching, says that she has a fractional CFO. So
that'll be Anita.
There you go. Let's wind things up. What I'll do is when we're done, I'm going to update the YouTube and the podcast information with all of your LinkedIn profile URLs. But why don't we have you give a shout out to your website addresses, so if people want to find you and maybe talk to you later, that they can find you online. Kevin, how about we start with you?
Yeah, sure. Mine's trajectory-cfo.com. You can reach me on there, and I'd love to hear from you. Anyone that has any questions too about how a fractional CFO works or specific issues, I try to be, and I think everybody else on this call is just try to be a great resource, because maybe what you're looking for is or isn't a CFO, but it's about building up a good roster of resources such as everybody. And I'm glad, David, that you did this call today, because now that I know with these other folks, Jennifer, Devoreaux, Matt, always trying to build up, a good network of professionals that we can help our clients with, because I think that this fractional type of working, as Matt mentioned, is once that a client is open to that, they see it as a great tool for accelerating their business and getting the help they need. So, but yes, trajectory-cfo.com. Talk to you soon.
Devoreaux, how about you?
Absolutely. Well, LinkedIn is certainly my favorite digital place to be. So you can find me anytime on LinkedIn at Devoreaux Walton. And the website is berevelant.com. I intentionally named my firm Revelant because it's a play on the word relevant, but the autocorrect is always very consistent. So when you type in Revelant, it's going to put relevant. So you will have to go back, but it's berevelant.com. It's the best place to find me. And I'd love to talk to anybody, even for a free strategy session about your marketing. So feel free to reach out anytime.
Awesome. Mathew.
So LinkedIn is great. DMs are open. If you're a business owner, a person who's watching this who lives in or is transacting in Illinois, it's subscriptionattorney.com. There's a schedule call button there for a free 15-minute get-to-know-you call to see if it's a good fit. And it's only $20 a month to try it out to see if it's worth it. So give it a try. For anyone who wants to hear me talk more about what I do specifically, it's MathewKerbis.com, MathewKerbis.com. That's my speaker portfolio. And you don't need to watch more than one or two of those because I say a lot of the same things on there. But that's also where this is going to live in the future, too, when this is finalized.
Awesome. And Jennifer.
Sure. I also, of course, love LinkedIn, have open DMs and love to hear from people. But my website is jsdhumanresources.ca. And I'm really excited to have met Mathew because a lot of people do try to use HR consultants to avoid having to call their lawyer. And they should not do that. And I push back quite hard on it. I don't have any clients in Illinois, unfortunately, Mathew, but hopefully there are some others out there because I think to have a roster of fractional experts available just makes perfect business sense. And don't try to, why not get the expert in the area that you need help in? Don't try to put squeeze the wrong advice out of the wrong person. Just go for it. It's reasonable. And nobody cares more about their clients than fractional support people. We really, really do. We get very personally involved with their success. So I think it's a great solution.
Yeah, I think the big thing that business owners, I would imagine, should take away from this is if there's a particular domain within the leadership categories of the business that they struggle with, and they're always asking, second guessing themselves, am I doing the right thing? Is this really the right thing to do? Just to know that there are these specialists out there. I was having a conversation with someone that I know the other day, and he was talking about this sort of software automation issue he was having, getting a CRM to talk to some other piece of software, and just trying to fuddle through on his own, looking up YouTube videos and stuff. And I said, there are like people out there that are pros that would probably answer this whole problem for you just immediately off the top of their head. It would make sense for you, if this is such a mission critical thing, to get one of these people in your lives, just so that you can keep going back to the same resource who can become familiar with your company. And it would become a more and more efficient relationship. Right? I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. This has been awesome. I want to thank you all for coming in today. And I want to thank all the viewers for tuning in. And please hit the like button, hit the share button. And if you think you might want to learn more about any of these 4 professionals, look down in the show notes. You'll find their contact information. And thanks a lot. It's been a great time.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, David.
All right. We'll talk to you later. Bye. So, how can you learn more about buying, selling, financing, and managing small and medium-sized businesses? Easy. Go over to my blog site, davidcbarnett.com, where you can learn more about me and how I work with my clients. You can learn more about my books and courses that I prepared for you. You can find out how to subscribe to my email list, the YouTube playlists, and more. There's literally hundreds of hours of content there, all for free, and I'd love for you to be my guest. Special thanks go to Mark Willis at Lake Growth Financial, today's video sponsor. Mark helps people better manage their personal and business finances through the Bank on Yourself insurance strategy. This is something I've done personally, and I've seen others use it successfully for years. Go to newbankingsolution.com to find all the interviews I've done with Mark and learn more about the advantages of these programs. While there, sign up for a free consultation to learn what this solution might look like for you.